technical difficulties. I am here with my amazing friends and co-creators of Ascension, Rob Doherty and Brian Kibbler. Hey guys.
Hey.
Hello, hello.
So if anybody is out there in the chat world, make some comments. Let me know if this is actually working or if I only think it's working, because it would be pretty silly for us to have this conversation just us, which we could do.
You may be better at making games than working with the technology.
Oh, that is for sure true. That is for sure true. Yeah, I spent like the last 5 minutes just kind of struggling with we had an overlay and all kinds of stuff, and it was like, oh no, none of that's going to happen right now. So you guys are just going to see right inside the Discord chat that we're actually having this from. So
this is a very high production value.
That's
broadcast,
right. Only the finest. Only the finest. Maybe we'll get into some of these stories about the various technical difficulties that that we've had as a company and as a project over the years. We're much better at making physical things than we are making digital things. That's a key lesson that we learned over the years. All right. Well, so I have a bunch of awesome topics to cover, including some hilarious stories. But I think for a lot of people, and I've gotten a bunch of questions from people before this through social media. Any of you guys that want to have specific questions for any of us, go ahead and post them in the chat, and we'll be addressing those. But for those that don't know the origin story, let's talk a little bit about how we all met and how this crazy world that now we all make a living in gaming came to be. Rob, as the elder statesman, you want to kick that one off?
Wow, one of already. Geez.
Yeah, well, it's fair. So yeah, I mean, we all met through as I have with so many of my gaming friends in the industry. We all met through Magic the Gathering, and playing on the Magic Pro Tour, working on decks and and playing in events. My store team was super was very well known, and we had a whole bunch of really great people on it. And Justin, is that how you started working? Got your first start with Upper Deck when the team was called in for Versus?
Yeah, that's generally right. Everybody that was awesome from the Your Move Games team, which was my, the squad for Magic, then started working on the Versus system at Upper Deck, and then I was in law school at the time and miserable, and they were like, hey, how about instead of being in law school in New York, you come work with us and make games in San Diego? That turned out to be a really good idea. That worked out very well. So that's how we kind of got in. That brought me into the game design world, and we all got that connected. And Brian, when did you get into that subgroup there? How do we get?
So I had been competing in Magic professionally, and what that mostly meant was competing in the Magic tournaments that existed then, and also playing online poker, because you couldn't make a living as a professional gamer. Back, this was like 2005, I want to say.
Back in the olden days. Crazy. Make a living as a pro gamer? That's crazy talk.
Yeah, and it was really, back then it was like, okay, I wrote strategy articles for websites, and I competed in like maybe a tournament every other month, because there just weren't that many events to play in. There weren't meaningful online events or anything. And I just kind of got sick of it. I was like, I got sick of playing poker. I got like, a little bit burnout just in general. And I had actually just won the first Versus System Pro Circuit that summer. And Ben Rubin, who's a good friend of mine, sort of messaged me, and he was like, hey, you want to come, work on Versus System? Because he was working on it as well at the time. I was living in Atlanta, where I'd gone to college. And I'm like, you know what? That sounds better than what I'm doing now, and sort of just packed up and moved to California.
Yeah.
So the Versus system was really cool. It had the Marvel and DC license, and basically Upper Deck was working on it, but they were having some issues, and they needed some development work, and they contacted me and Dave, I think through Dave Humphreys. And they basically asked if our team would be interested in coming down and helping them with some development on the game, basically kicking the tires and seeing, okay, is this thing this thing hold up? And so basically everybody from my store, like who was on the professional team, flew down there, and they put us up in a nice hotel, and come in and play the game, and we played, and basically it wasn't quite where it needed to be, and we ended up doing a lot more design work in addition to development, and that's how I think Justin and I got sort of hooked up with those guys. And then they basically basically anybody from that group who wanted to work there pretty much did. At the time I was running at a game store, and I was also running events for Magic the Gathering and for Konami. I passed on the working at that particular company, but I was super into games, and I was tinkering and creating games on my own. Basically take some money, put it in a pile, light it on fire, and
yeah. So there's a bunch of key things here, and there was a ton of incredibly talented people both at Upper Deck and other people that helped bring Ascension to life. But one of the reasons I was excited to talk about the three of us, because there's these key skills that we all started developing that sort of came together to make this possible, and that we have now all since continued to develop and make other cool things possible. But one area I wanted to focus on is, when we made that shift from being pro players to being game designers, right? That was not an obvious or necessarily an intuitive shift, right? It was something I had to spend a lot of time sort of consciously thinking, like, what does it take to play a game at a high level, which has a certain valuable skill set, versus what does it take to make games that people want to play? I'm wondering if you guys want to talk a little bit about what that shift was like, and what maybe some lessons that people could take away that were like that then ended up informing our later designs, or that people could use if they're at home and they want to make their own games.
Well, I actually think Versus System is a great example of like people in that transitional phase making a game,
yes,
right?
Because 100%.
One of the things that you see, I think, when like highly capable competitive players make a game, they will frequently make a game that they will win, right? Like they're making a game that is for them and for people like them. And typically that means the game has a very high level of complexity and very much rewards, very skilled play. And, one of the things when, Versus System was like, it did pretty well, but over time kind of interest kind of decreased, and ultimately ended up getting shut down. And I think a big part of it was that it never really captured a big casual player base. It was launched with a professional tour. It was really like a lot of highly competitive people playing it, and there aren't that many of those people. And I think that one of the things that we learned coming out of Upper Deck, coming out of Versus System, was okay, well, we got to make games that aren't just the thing that we want to play, the thing that other people want to play too.
That's right. And yeah, go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say, and basically, I think Ascension is a great marriage between those things. So basically, one of the lessons that I've learned over time, and I'll frequently refer to it as the simple stick, but basically, you start out designing something, and you're like, look at me, look at all the cool stuff I can do. And you like pile on all these mechanics, and and you're like, it's like you're showing off to yourself, or your game design buddy is like, I can do all these things. And there's a big question of should you? And basically what I learned to do over time is, all right, you make your game and you do your stuff and you get it ready, and then and you have a play testable thing, and you play it and make sure, okay, this is I'm on generally the right track. But then you take and you start just whacking stuff off of it. How much can I take away from this and still have that awesome game experience? You don't have to throw those things away forever. You put them on the shelf, and that can be a mechanic for an expansion or whatnot. But basically, boil it down, simplify it down, and get it down to the core, that what's making this fun. What's here at the very bottom. And so if you do that right, what you end up with is a game where you can show somebody, you can show your brother who never games, your mom, your girlfriend, whoever, and they can watch it being played and play a couple turns, and they get it. They're like, oh, okay, this is cool, this is fun. And then if you're doing things correctly, the next sort of hard step is to make it so that players like us, the things we want to design for, oh, we like to play competitive card games, we want to play for big money on the line, super high skill, whatever. Having a deep game that you can get to through play, but it's not that it's hard to learn. It's that there's a lot, there's a lot of cool stuff there. And Ascension really, I think, nailed that in that, like, pro Magic players, they love them some Ascension. Like they really like to play that, and they'll play against other high level people, and they'll be talking about, oh, I made this, I bought this, and I did that. Like all the plays that they make. And Justin, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, but I felt like your design on that was just awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll ship a couple things. One, I think everything that you just said is is just gold for anybody out there that wants to design games. I mean, really, that like make things as simple as possible. Build for that pyramid where it's like the top players have things to discover, that easy to learn, difficult to master thing, but really checking your instincts around doing every cool thing that you can think of, and bringing that in. And that was a big part of what we did with Ascension. And you were the first person to realize that in many ways, more so even than I was, because I will never forget the first sort of moment I discovered Dominion and I loved the deck building concept, and I really was like, oh, but I really just want more variety. I want it to be kind of simpler and cleaner. And I'd sort of made this initial version of it that had the center row and had that concept, but I never really thought of it as like something I was going to produce. Like I didn't have a company at the time. I didn't have any of these things. And I was at one of your tournaments at the one of the Epic 5Ks.
This was May 2009. And basically, I was running, so I had a game that I currently have, Epic card game. In a previous life, it was a trading card game. And so I basically made a trading card game, and I knew event organizers through my other work, and had events throughout the country, and so I launched this trading card game, and I had events around, and I was having one in Florida, and Justin was from Florida, and I was going to be going down and renting a house and staying there with my family and going to Disney and going and run a tournament. And I was like, hey, Justin, would you like to come? Would you like to come hang out? And
take some of your money, because I won that tournament.
As it turned out, that tournament itself wasn't hugely successful for the growth of that particular game, but
for my wallet,
it was awesome.
Worked really well. Really good.
We were discussing deck builders, and basically Dominion had come out recently, and we're like, oh, what an awesome, genius concept of how this new sort of game engine. But we were bemoaning that game doesn't hold up great for super high level players, because we will look at the available cards that get laid out in the beginning, and we'll be like, oh, we're going to do this and that and that, and put those together in these ratios to make the deck that's going to crush everything. All these other things are worthless, and go. And it's just a matter of, do I build this thing before my opponent does, or do they not see it? And so while the game engine as a whole was super awesome, that wasn't there. And like Justin and I were sort of brainstorming about this, and he talked about this idea he had of like, well, maybe you could have a random selection of stuff come up, like shuffle up the deck instead of like laying out piles, shuffle them up and have random stuff come out. It's be like kind of more like a Magic draft. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. That right there is like the starting core for a game. That's it. Like that, that's gold right there.
Your exact words were, you have the ball, run. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. And I was like, really? Yeah. And like, okay, here we go. And I just started working and designing and bouncing ideas off of. And I think it was around this time I started showing it to you, Brian.
I think it was like Gen Con 2009.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So a couple months later,
you had your initial prototype. I think at that point, like there was like the row moved, and like the things at the end got eaten or something.
That's correct. That's correct. And So
it was like there was
that's an example of the simple stick coming in.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. There was this additional mechanic of like there's kind of a conveyor belt system of the cards in the center row, and they'd like disappear from the board if they weren't purchased before they went. And it was like, okay, well, you know, like the core was there, but there was kind of what you're talking about. There's too much, right? It's like,
Right.
okay, well, do we need this? Can we get rid of this? Can we just like, you know, distill it down to what the cool part is?
Yeah, and that it is. It's a great example because I was very much afraid of the fact that because it was only a 6 card set in a row, and if it ever got stuck, right, the cards were not cards we wanted to buy, the game would break down. And so this conveyor belt idea created all kinds of cool game mechanics, and it made sure to solve that problem. But it was just such an awkward thing to do physically to constantly be shuffling things down the row. And so then yeah, finally at one point it's like, well, what if we just didn't do that? What if we just removed it? And the game was instantly better. Like if you take one lesson away from this, it's cut
I don't
stuff.
remember if there were the always availables at the beginning, right? Like I think that when there was a conveyor belt,
There were 3 instead of the 2. Yeah. So, but
yeah, we had them scaling up.
The first iteration had the three always availables, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
Yeah. The progression gets a little foggy, but yeah, it's like, yeah, concept was, you know, like concept was okay. This is a cool mechanic to pursue a game from was May, and then I wasn't involved in the next step. It was like, okay, you know, Justin, go. You got the ball, run with it, and then then you took it back and worked on it, basically designed it, and had the combat system and the monsters, and and basically, okay, here's a working prototype, and then sent it to me, Rob, check this out, what do you think? And it's, and obviously Brian, and so that was, you had sort of the initial design was all you, and then more design stuff came in from Brian and from me, and like and obviously lots of play testers.
Oh, we had so many, we had so many talented people working on this. That's the thing. Something like this doesn't just happen with one person or even 3 people. It was like so many. That's the beauty of like the connections that we all have made through Magic, through the time working at Upper Deck. We were able to work with so many smart people, and I could just be like, here, check this out, right? I didn't, now we have a team of full-time people that all work on Ascension all the time and that are working on Ascension tactics now and doing all the things. But back then it was just like, hey, friends, please take a look at this.
You want to come by, have some drinks, and play a game?
Exactly. Pizza and beer. You need a playtest team. Pizza and beer. That was the key. That was the key, man. It was great. And honestly, like I look back so fondly on those times. It was so much fun to kind of put it all together and just try to figure things out. And it was, I want to talk about it both on the production side and on the marketing side a little bit, because on the production side, Rob had already done, even though I had worked at Upper Deck, I was, mostly on the games and design and the brand side. And Rob had been building things on his own and launching his own games and had been through it all. So it was a big part of what gave me the confidence was partnering with him to be like, oh, well, actually know how to get things made, because I wouldn't even have known where to start. And so it was really great that even the projects that you did that maybe weren't as successful became the stepping stone to launching something like Ascension or even relaunching something like Epic. And so there's this really cool process of a lot of things that you've learned that now have grown multiple successful companies.
Yeah. So so we had, we had that discussion, and you had that brilliant idea, and I was like, that's awesome. You got the ball, go. And then and we talked about, we could team up and we could do this thing together. And then you and often did some work, and then you showed me what you had done, and I was like, wow, this is really great. This is awesome. Are you sure you still want to partner? Because you've done a bunch of this without me, and I'd understand if you didn't want to. Are you sure? And you were like, hell yes.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I basically I had produced a bunch of games at that point. I had done a bunch of games with a great friend of mine, Chad Ellis, with Your Move Games Incorporated. So we named basically same name as my store and my Magic team. We had a company that made games, and we had made several games. A board game called Succession, a tabletop war game called Battleground, and some card games. And I had then gone on and done a trading card game, the Epic trading card game, which I was actually still doing at that time. And basically, so I had learned through that and through previous projects how to produce things, like how to get work with a printer, how to get the files together, how to get in touch with distributors. I literally, with early games, would call up distributors, arrange meetings with them, fly out to various cities with a prototype, sit down with the sales team, show them the game, and talk about how this would work for them. Cold call stores, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
I had done stuff with conventions like the Gamma Trade Show and Gen Con and other conventions. So I had all this experience. I had yet to have a hit game. I had games that people liked and they were fans of and that were still being produced, and they made some money, but they didn't make enough money to actually pay significant quantities.
Make money.
Make money. They had revenue. They might not have had profits, but they had revenue.
Yeah.
I did some design and development stuff, but one of my sort of biggest roles was, all right, handle all the production and distribution stuff. Basically, make it into from a really cool thing that we have to play on cards that we write on to working to a actual physical game.
Into a real boy.
I know, really. Look at this. It's a really real boy. And one of the cool things is now we've actually taken that first set, which I still have, and we actually was in when Gen Con had its 50th anniversary, was in their museum of the big things. Like that was like a part of Gen Con and a part of the history of gaming. It was like really, really cool to see that something that we had all made like be a part of this world that like we've all gotten so much out of, and that now we're kind of part of this universe. And now we're doing the 10th anniversary edition. We're re-updating all the art and kind of modernizing everything and making those few little tweaks that annoyed us for all these years of like the gameplay, little gameplay things that we can make better. So that's been awesome. I also want to highlight, because you probably picked it up from Rob's answer, but Rob is like the hardest working person I think I know in the entire gaming industry. Like when he says, I did a couple of things at conventions, like he would just be there morning, noon, and night, running events, doing interviews, talking to distributors, doing the things, bringing the pallets in by hand, basically everything that needed to happen. I'll never forget, we were the Stormasols, and when we were at Spiel Essen, so I don't know if you want to tell the story, but like we're getting we're going to Spiel Essen, which is in Germany, and it's like the biggest board game convention in the world, like 100,000, some absurd number of people, and we are just about to release our third set, was our first like big expansion release, and we're super excited about it. And we fly the team over there, we set up the booth, we pay tons of money, and again, the key distinction between revenue and profit is really important here, because we were not like very profitable at this point. We were making money, the game was doing well, but we were spending it all, and we spent it all to go over there. We're going to sell this game, we're going to promote it, this is the hype, and then the product doesn't show up. We don't know what's going on. We're just sitting there, and Rob just starts asking around and like finds some like shady guy, I don't know who this was or whatever, to find out that like apparently we got hauled up in customs. And, if you paid the right person or talked to the right thing, somehow, like, we're sitting the whole first day of the show floor. We have nothing. We have no product. We're just like,
hey, come back tomorrow, maybe.
We're here. Come, please. Trust us. There's a really cool game coming. And Rob is, like, running around behind the scenes and talking to the right people and getting the things. And I think it was, like, early in day 3, I think we finally got, or late in day 2, we finally got the product in, and the pallet just shows up, and then we're all just scrambling and burning through stuff, and thank God we were able to turn it around, and there were enough people that were convinced enough about our spiel without product that came back, and we were able to sell it and survive, and then celebrate in Amsterdam afterwards, which we'll see if we get into any of those stories as this develops. We got some...
that was probably the most stressful show ever. And the thing is, like, a lot of that happens to companies a lot, where basically stuff will get held up, and you got the show in Spiel in Germany, and stuff gets held up in customs, and like a lot of times they're like, yeah, you can get it Monday, no problem. Show's over.
Yeah.
So that super chaotic. That's a skill I've improved over time.
Yeah. You learn
that problem.
Yeah, you learn a lot of lessons the hard way, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I believe that was my first show outside the country. So I had done lots and lots of trade shows in the US, but this was a whole new ball game, like dealing with stuff in in a different country. And I feel terrible. I'm blanking on the guy's name who helped me out, but basically the a local was super awesome, super helpful. And he stopped by my booth like last year, and I said hi. So like great. Awesome, and thank you.
That was a savior. That was a close one. So I want to shift a little bit from the kind of production side stuff and some of the early design stories, and talk a little bit about marketing and talk a little bit about how we got this game into people's brains and how we got it to exist, because this is not easy, right? Everybody, if you're a small game, even if you have a great game that's phenomenal, very hard to get noticed. It's very hard to get recognized, and it was somewhat of a different world back then. But I knew that we were going to be okay because I had a secret weapon. I had Mr. Brian Kibbler, who we were able to kind of create this pretty amazing experience during our launch. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that process and how we kind of got there and what that first set of sales was like and what we did.
It was funny because this was again back 10 years ago. It was like 2010. So this was like before like there was like influencer marketing, right? Yeah. There wasn't Instagram back then, right? Like nowadays you think of like, oh, influence, it's just a thing that companies do to sell things. But that wasn't really necessarily like a concept back then. And like, I'm just a loudmouth on social media, right? And like that was true 10 years ago as it is today. And basically like, we didn't have a marketing budget really. We just had a game that we made, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to just talk about this game and post stuff all the time on like Twitter, and like take it with me to every Magic tournament that I go to, and like like have people like demo it to people between rounds of tournaments that I'm playing in and everything like that. And that was like right when I was back into like playing Magic competitively professionally. At that point I was like playing on the Pro Tour again, and it was like one of the biggest like names in Magic and everything. So there were a lot of people who were like, ooh, you helped make this game, like I want to try it, and it just like kind of became this like thing people just got super hyped about in the Magic community.
Yep, yeah, and it was great. We got this kind of buzz going, and it got like a more legitimacy, right? And in part, we've all, as your background in particular, but all of us as pro players and pro champions, and that like there's something legitimate going on with this game that you should check it out. And then we actually bring it to Gen Con for our very first thing. We're broke. Basically, I spent all my savings. Rob kicked in some cash. We're like, all right, let's see what happens. And we got the smallest possible booth at Gen Con. Oh, yeah. and I worked a deal with where we got we doubled the booth size through a marketing fellowship because Brian, we were promoting the hell out of everything. And then we brought our stuff, and very quickly it became clear that booth was not going to be enough for us. Yeah. Like we started taking over neighboring booths and neighboring tables, because once someone would demo the game, they would be so excited about it, they would just take it and just start playing it like right next to the booth.
It was super convenient because we were right next to one of the concessions areas, and there were a bunch of tables that were there for to like eat their concessions on. Yeah. And more or less our demo area ended up spilling over into almost all of those tables. Right. That's right. Someone would buy their game and they would just set it up on one of the concession tables and start playing. People walk over like, what are you playing? Like, and it just kind of like had this really, really impressive just kind of like viral effect of people like going out, seeing people playing with it. Because I do think that not only the game itself, but like the really unique art style, really like just you see it on the table, you're like, wow, what's that, right? Yeah. So one of the funniest things to me about like the actual production copies too was the beads, the honor beads.
Yes, I forgot about that story. Yes,
we were play testing, and we just gotten these like beads. I think it was from Michael's, right? They were just like beads that were like intended to be strung into necklaces or bracelets.
They go in like the bottom of fish bowls and stuff.
They had holes in them.
Yeah,
they were specifically like but they were just like various artistic crafting beads. And we were playing, and eventually like, okay, well, what do we get the honor beads to be in the real version? We're like, I like these. It's just like, we just gotten so used to the things that we'd been using. Yeah, they were like, all right, well, let's just find whoever actually makes these things we bought retail at Michael's and get them in the game, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and that was Rob. That was Rob doing some hunting for some physical. What factory in China?
Contacting a lot of people in China, and a lot lot of broken English emails.
Yeah, no,
But,
I remember that was in because we showed the game off at Gamma with the trade show, and we had used those beads because we didn't have anything else. We just picked them up at the store, and then people were like, "Oh my God, these are awesome! Does the game come with these?" And it's like, "Yes, yes, they do." Rob, figure out how to make these. Oh man, yeah, that was great. I forgot about that story. That's a good one. Yeah, and so these stories that we're telling and this Gen Con experience was exactly 10 years ago as of this weekend. I looked up the dates, and so it would actually be it's going to be August 5th. It would have been the exact date that we sold our very first copy of the game. And it's really just crazy to think. I never would have thought that 10 years later we would be here and having this discussion. And 15 sets that have been released in the public. We have more on the way. We have the Ascension Tactics game, which I'm going to promote a little bit here in the background. That we made a miniatures game version. We brought all of our characters coming to life in 3D. We have a painted version right here. All these 3D. This original Arha Templar was on the very first box. So anybody else that's excited about that, yeah, look at that, that's it. It is so cool to see all this, and now to be able to kind of do this other project on Kickstarter and to launch so many other things in careers, right? Because for you, Brian, there was that you were an influencer before there were influencers, before it was cool, and then you sort of just followed down that path and have now become a behemoth in your own right for all of these things and playing all these awesome games. And Rob, you started your own other company, and now you have other awesome games that you just finished a hugely successful Kickstarter. You want to maybe hype up some of your stuff for everybody that's listening?
Sure. So yeah, I tinkered with a whole bunch of games before Ascension, and I've done a bunch of cool stuff after. We've got Star Realms deck building game, Hero Realms deck building game, Epic card game, which is like a strategy card game in a box, so we basically no card hunting, and Sorcerer, which is fantasy horror, and we've got more cool games in pipeline. Yeah. And I gotta say, Justin was super supportive. Like when I had this I wanted to do like a PvP battling deck builder where you're knocking your opponent's score down, and I talked to Justin about, hey, I want to do this thing, but it's kind of in competition with this game that we already have. And Justin, you couldn't have been cooler about it. You were like, looks awesome, go, and you help promote and et cetera. And I feel like that's a really cool thing about the hobby game community is I don't think of other game producers as competitors. I think of them as friends, and there's there's enough gaming dollars to go around. Like people have this. People have more than one board game. They got so yeah, that was super awesome.
Yeah, I think I mean I love both you guys. If it should become clear to people that are watching, these are just some of the kindest, most awesome people in the world, and I've been fortunate enough to surround myself with it. And I feel like there's so many awesome people in this industry, and we kind of all help each other out, and there's this crazy merry-go-round of different projects and different cool things, but working with awesome people and making awesome things, and then the more people that make awesome games and make awesome content that I get to consume, the happier I am, right? That's that's why I started my podcast and did my book on Think Like a Game Designer, because I'm like, hey, other people can learn a lot of these lessons. We're talking about all the hard lessons that we had to learn and figure things out. I want other people to make games, and then they build on top of what we're doing. And so one of the questions I got from from fans was talking about how the difference between when Ascension was released and deck building games were new and that was an innovation, to now where deck building games are a building block for new things. Yeah. This has become a part of these other games. And so, I'll kick it off with just obviously talking about Ascension Tactics, where we took the bones of Ascension, right? You're still playing the fundamentals of Ascension, and then instead of killing monsters with power, you're commanding your miniatures that are battling, and there's this whole tactical game next to it. That game would have been inconceivable 10 years ago. There's just too much new and too much wacky stuff. But now it's this sort of natural fit of two genres, or things like Slay the Spire, or variations of and you have some great variations of PvP and PvE with Hero Realms, and a lot of the games. Maybe talk about some of the other stuff that what's different today and what new things are possible today?
Well, one like very popular genre of game that I really consider to be a spiritual descendant of deck building games are the auto battlers.
Yeah.
Right, things like either like the original Dota Auto Chess or TFT or Hearthstone Battlegrounds. Those are really about you no longer have cards, right? They're these units or whatever, but you're effectively like using resources to purchase them, to add them to your pool, like this shared draft pool essentially, much like in a deck building game. And it because it is a digital product rather than a physical product, it sort of transforms the what each thing represents necessarily, but it has the same roots of essentially a drafting game where the drafting is part of the game rather than a precursor to the game.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like drafting as part of a game, live drafting during play. I mean, you see it in like in a game like Seven Wonders, or in like in the deck builders, and that sort of core mechanic is just so fun to play around with. Like like you're getting to live react and change what you're doing like midstream during the game is super super fun.
Yeah.
And it makes
Yeah, that's fun. I mean, that's functionally what that Ascension Center Row was intended to be, was this sort of representation of drafting in this sort of public format where you're interacting and playing. And then there's so many puzzle pieces and ways you can play with that, whether that's Ascension or Ascension Tactics or Star Realms, which then is more sort of aggressive, attacking each other. And then I made a version that was inspired by Star Realms for Shards of Infinity, where it's that same kind of concept. And then now we added a leveling mechanic where you can level up your player character and level up your cards. And so all of these things, we all kind of feed on each other's ideas and build new things, and I love seeing it all come together. And then the digital side of stuff opens up tons of things. I got so obsessed with some of the digital deck builders, like the Slay the Spire, and I think Monster Train that came out.
Riftlands, it's one of the newer ones.
What's it called? Riftlands. No.
It's really cool. It's like a story based kind of like deck builder PvE battler thing. It's really neat.
All right. Well, it's on my list. There goes my productivity for the rest of the weekend. That's the thing, man. I'm like, yeah, I have that. I think we all do that, like addictive personality for these kinds of things, where you're just like, once you start seeing the puzzle, and no, get out of here. I only play these games for like 6 hours a day, 6 days a week.
I literally play games all day, like for my job, and then like I'm done. I'm like, I'm gonna start another game.
Yeah, let's wrap.
That's how my brain works, right? Like, oh, you took today off from stream. What are you doing? I'm like sitting here playing Battlegrounds. Nothing. Like
nothing. It's fine. Everything's fine. Yeah. So
speaking of like finishing work and playing a game, I remember I think it was ACD Games Day, which is a distributor convention put on by ACD. Justin and I were there, and promoting Ascension. I think this was the very first year, so I think it was just and we had just been working all day demoing to people. And then there was like this, after party thing where people are getting together and they've got drinks and food and, tables and people are hanging out. And like Justin and I like break out Ascension and start playing against each other. And Bob Maher walks by and looks at us and is like, really? Like, yeah, it's awesome. We're having fun.
Yeah. Well, it makes a big difference. Like, honestly, like when it's so much work to make a game, it's so much work, especially, if you're running a company and launching all these things, like if you don't love what you're making, if you don't love what you're doing, or even, obviously streaming, you're streaming 6 hours a day or whatever it is. Like if you didn't love what you were doing, that would get old really fast. So like, I believe that you have to find that thing that makes you passionate enough that work doesn't feel like work. I mean, sometimes it does. Let's be honest. But most of the time, it doesn't feel like work. It makes a huge difference, and is the only way you're going to be able to like do incredible things, because you're willing to put in that time, and it feels like a fun part of the process. And yeah, hanging around with people that you like to hang around with, also key. So I want to talk a little bit about story and the immersiveness of worlds, because I think we all come from a pretty mechanics first kind of background, right? We're like into the game and breaking the thing down to its parts and seeing all the clever interactions and beating other people with it or whatever, right? But But I've learned over the years, like, not only did we built a whole world around Ascension, and we've already talked a little about the cool art. Eric Saby that did all the initial art for the game, and I'll share the brief story around that because Eric Saby, the reason why Eric Saby did all the art for the game is because he lived down the hall from me like 10 years earlier when I graduated from college, and we used to get together and smoke weed together. And I saw all of his awesome artwork on the walls. I was like, this is super cool. And we couldn't afford to like hire, the magic artists or whatever, like the people who you would normally think of. And so I called him up. I was like, dude, your art is awesome. Can we make a world around it? And we actually designed the world around the game mechanics plus his art style to build something that made sense and that could kind of all fit together. And it was a really cool process. But it started with the gameplay. It started with the mechanics. And I don't know if you guys remember the horrifically inappropriate card art and names I had during those first couple prototype sessions. I'm not going to share the specifics here, but it was just, it was all over the place. But over time, I've really started to invest a lot more in building a great story first and like building the world first. So like our most recent release with Ascension was the Skulls and Sails, which is a pirate themed set, and you're moving pirate ships around the board and everything. And that was started from like, I want to make a pirate thing. What will that feel like? And then build everything from there. And we've tried to make the Ascension narrative and the world and the story tell a much bigger arc. And that's driven a lot more of what's going on. It's been a really fun process, and I'm curious how you guys feel about that these days. If it changes, if you still feel like mechanics first, and whatever the story is the story.
Well, this just reminds me of one of my favorite stories of relating to the story of the game was when we were having sort of discussions surrounding the name of the game, right?
Yeah.
And
I know where this is going.
The name of initially the game was Ascension Chronicle of the Godslayer. And we're just like, maybe if we want to try and sell this game in like Barnes and Noble or something, it shouldn't say God Slayer on the box. And Justin's like, but you're literally killing a god. I'm like, no, you're literally playing a board game. But eventually we sort of changed that.
Yeah, I had no idea that we would actually be successful with this thing. So it was just like, it sounds cool. Let's go with it. Yeah. Eventually we took that off the box so we could sell it in more places. Yeah, this is great. I love all these stories cropping up. These are some good times, some fun decisions. What about you, Rob? I know you've got a lot of really cool variety of different worlds in your games and everything.
So sometimes, like I sometimes design from mechanics first, and sometimes I design from story or concept first. I think from the stuff that I'm working on, I think the game that has the lore that I'm I think is the most exciting and sort of fun to delve into is the Sorcerer game, which is this fantasy horror. As Justin mentioned, I just finished a Kickstarter for an expansion for it. But this I'm working with a friend of mine, Peter Schultz, who's from Slovakia, and he's super into researching lore and legends, and so he'll like deep dive into some cultures, stories, myths, and all the cards in that game come from various stories from like this from this Eastern European country, or this or this stuff in this legend out of Africa, or etc. So there's just so much lore on it. On the when you open up the Sorcerer box, on the inside it has like stories about each of the characters as you turn the box around. So like that, and that process of like sort of starting with, okay, here's this legend, here's this myth, and then making cards based on that. So that game I think has sort of is the strongest sort of lore first, and sort of getting the mechanics to match what the myths and legends are. But you can go the other way and have the mechanics that you love, and then be in search of a genre. Like, okay, I have this really cool mechanic, I really love it. What does this match up to in the real world or in fantasy world? How how can I connect this? And then then obviously you can make tweaks to the game to be like, okay, well, I've decided, this is a game about, pirates or dinosaurs or whatever it is, and then you can, tweak from there.
Yeah.
But I think my instincts are definitely on the mechanics first side. I get as Justin was mentioning, I'm one of those people who get really intrigued with how the various mechanics works and cool interactions and etc. And then, but yeah, it can't be understated how important that that storytelling aspect is, both to drawing people into the game and the universe and making it immersive, but also helping you create cool and unique concepts. Because once you're like, oh, we're in this world and it works this way, and there's these stories, it guides you in making sort of the thematic mechanics for the factions, etc. Once you've got that story background.
Yeah.
I think it also just gives another way for people to get invested in your game, right? Another way for people to care about your game, providing, having a world and a story that people can get invested in and care about. Not necessarily everyone, like we were saying, is going to be the person who's like, I care, about being the best possible at this game. I want to figure out every little bit of strategy or whatever. Some people, they just want to appreciate the artistry of it, and part of that artistry, I think, is creating a compelling story and world to set it in.
Yeah, and I think those things, you see different people come at it from different angles, and I mean, now we have fans who have gotten tattoos of characters, of Ascension characters, and have gotten married and had wedding cake toppers of Ascension characters and do cosplay, all of these things that, again, were just like not imaginable to me at the beginning, but like that resonates, that story and the characters and the art and the style of everything resonates with people so deeply, and it's been awesome to have that community now for a decade. So I gotta say, there was one question that I got more often than any other for us to answer, and I'm gonna want us to answer it, and I'm gonna want people in the chat to answer it too. And that question is, what is your favorite Ascension set and why? So I'll give you guys a second to think about it, because this is always tough for me. I always feel like it's like choosing between my babies, like I love them all for different reasons, and so I really am curious to see what the fans are, what the fans say here. And we've done this poll actually on our Facebook page before, and the answers are all over the map, which is, I think, a sign that we're doing it right? Because we design them intentionally. A big part of when we talk about it is we'll design to shift for appeal. One set will appeal specifically to one type of player, and another set will appeal to another type of player. And so, like, for example, like Storm of Souls was very mechanic-y, very much like grindy, lots of little interactions and sacrificing things for bonuses. And so the players who are like all about being the best and winning and having the highest skill players tend to love Storm of Souls. And then the next big set we did after that, which I think is actually going to be the one I do for my favorite, is the opposite. It was Rise of Vigil. And that was where we had the energy mechanic. And that was the first time we put treasure cards into the set, and that created, the cards could be even more powerful if they showed up with treasure, or if you had enough energy to get them. So it was like this whole other wheel to spin. So it created these very big, exciting, splashy moments, but it was a lot more random. And so for me, I always really enjoyed that experience a lot, even though some of our most competitive players, that would be their least favorite set. And so there's a whole range of these things. So now that I've stalled long enough, who would like to go first?
I'm literally like Googling the set names. Other than like the first few, I honestly just forgot about a lot of the names of the expansions.
If you could just describe it, we could probably help you out.
Which one was that? Like, it's been a long time at this point.
This, by the way, also to buy you even more time, I'll tell the story, because this is something that is often a problem, and I'm sure that when people start saying, "Oh my God, what about this card and this card and this thing and that?" and I'm like, I don't know any of those names. Like, they were just playtest names for all the time I was playing with it. Like, that card was called Elon Musk until like a month before we shipped it. So I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But so yeah, this is a common problem for game designers. So all right, have we Googled?
I think mine was probably also Rise of Vigil. Like, I think that the swinginess of that was super fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
Which was the one that had was Dreamscape the one that eventually had the drafting mechanic?
Yeah, where you drafted the Dreamscape cards and you had those on the side. Yeah.
I don't like that set specifically. Wasn't necessarily my favorite, but the drafting mechanic was one that we literally almost had in set 2, right?
Yes.
Like, that was almost in Return of the Fallen. I think we were like, and eventually we're just like, no, we don't need this yet, right? Like, there's enough simple things that we can do, so we don't need to like add this like significant additional level of complexity.
Simple stick.
Yeah, and we just kind of kept for pretty much every expansion, we're like, do we do this now? Do we do this now? Do we do this now?
Yeah.
And kind of just kept putting it off for a very long time because it was like, no, we have this other idea, and this just kind of muddies the waters. So it kind of eventually became its own standalone thing when we eventually did put it out.
Yeah, that's right.
So for me, it's actually the base set, and I'm curious as to, is that something that comes up from, you know, like you said, the question gets asked a lot, like, but like I really enjoyed you know, a lot of the expansions, and like, you know, I like, as you mentioned, Storm of Souls, like, you know, I was one of the players who did enjoy the wonkiness of it, but like for sitting down and teaching a new player, like I enjoy like breaking games out at game night and setting on the table and showing people, and like base set Ascension is so accessible and so fun for people to play, and I can enjoy it while I'm playing with a person at you know, a very different skill level than me, a group of people at different skill levels than me, and show it to people, and you know, it's easy to learn, easy to play, you know, people have fun with it, like, you know. So it's base set for me. I'm curious, is that like, has it been completely eclipsed over, you know, over the years in the polling, or
not at all? Even in the chat right now, a bunch of people are saying the base set. And so it is a very common answer. Lots of people play it. For anybody that, you know, is not yet playing Ascension but is still hanging out for this chat for some reason and wants to learn more, you can play the base set for free on iOS and Android. It's free to download, so you can try it out and play it. And we have numbers, right? We know how many people just play the base set, and it's millions. I mean, like, you know, people love it and people play it all the time. And so it is still, you know, the foundation stone of everything, which is one of the reasons why I was so excited to envision it in the 10th anniversary, like really modernize a lot of the look and the art, and again, those couple little tweaks, you know, like Arbor to the Precipice gets +1 cost and +2 honor. We have a couple of the other cards that get little tweaks, yeah. So it's like still can happen early, but it's shifted. And then a lot of things we just up the honor of the higher cost cards, so they're easier to buy later game, and like the McKenna Initiate gives you 1 rune and 1 power instead of either or, because it was just way under power. So there's like a couple little things that were like outliers for me, that were like, all right, let's just smooth it out. Still the same experience.
It's so nice when you get to go back with the redo.
Yes.
Correct those little things that just bug you in the back of your head, like, oh I was so close.
Yeah.
Like, speaking of the base set and things that just kind of bugged you, like I remember when we were doing like one of the, like, you know, pretty late reviews, like pass on the initial set. I remember going through it and I was like, the Enlightened Initiate card was the only card in the, because the Lifebound Initiate was originally the Enlightened Initiate. It gave you a rune and an honor. Was the first, you know, before the first set actually went out.
Yeah.
And I remember going through the file and being like, this is the only card in all of Enlightened that produces any resources. Can it be the Enlightened thing that they don't, and we move this somewhere else? And just like that, like, editing pass basically became like
the worst thing that ever happened to me.
That was like, they have stuff like Ara Templar, you know, they just kill things directly. They don't muck around in, like, you know, the world of resources, because they're above it. They're Enlightened.
Yes.
And that just like, it was like, oh yeah, it probably should have worked that way since there's 1 card.
Yes. You are. That was so. This is a great thing to make from a design aesthetic standpoint, and how when you're crafting games, making sure that each of your factions and playstyles have certain rules that are associated with it. And most people that are listening are probably surprised to hear this, right? Because most people don't consciously register the fact that Enlightened never gives you runes or power. Yep. It doesn't interact with, or you know, it doesn't interact with those resources directly. And so it gives it a very different feeling that is very unconscious for most people. And what that usually means is anytime we introduce a new resource, we always give it to Enlightened, because we need design space, because there's only so much you can do. So give them something to do, you know. Or people notice that all the Mechana constructs always reference Mechana constructs, and the Mechana heroes always reference constructs generally. And there's, you know, a lot of these little subtle things, some more subtle, some less subtle, that help define each faction's existence. You know, actually, it's a good thing for another question that we get pretty regularly, which is a fun one. What is your favorite faction? Also really want to see the chat's answers on this, because we're actually having a faction competition right now in the Kickstarter, and the factions are competing. And each week we've actually gotten some pretty big shifts. You can like post on social media and make somebody wrote a poem. Somebody actually the fans actually demanded that we put the monster faction in. They created their own hashtag. They created their own little subset of things. So we added the monsters in. Somebody got dressed up as cultist cosplay. Like it's been super fun. It's super awesome. You can see it in one of our updates on the Kickstarter. It's amazing.
If I could pick the cultist as a faction, I'd like to pick the cultist.
Yeah. The other factions and cultists as a faction. I mean, who can get votes against that guy?
Oh my God, so amazing. We have a bunch of, because this Kickstarter's done so well, and we have some fans that have been asking for it. We're actually doing some new cultist art for cards in the set, including the Giga Cultist.
I saw that.
Yes, the Giga Cultist. Here, wait. I think I can show it to the audience here. This is the first look at the Giga Cultist, who's just basically a bunch of cultists with a coat around them, like standing on top of each other like a classic cartoon. And I love the look on his face. He's so happy. He's like just high up there. He never gets to be the champion at the top. Anyway, the cultist is a funny story actually too. We didn't get to tell. So the originally in Ascension there was no cultist at all. There was a game rule that you could just always turn 2 power into an honor point, into a point, because we needed some outlet for you to spend power. And it was like, well, that's kind of lame. What if we also made it a card? And I don't even remember how it ended up becoming a cultist. I think it was just one of Eric Sabe's art pieces that was like, this guy is hilarious. Let's make it him. And then fans just connected to him on such a deep level. And so he became this sort of running gag of everybody beating up the cultist. So then we made a bobblehead doll. And now in the Kickstarter, my very favorite add-on that we have is a cultist plushie. And it's a cultist plushie. Not only is it a cultist plushie, but it's also a bag in the back. You lift up his coat, his cape, and he has honor tokens in the back. So you could you could beat him up and pull honor tokens out of him. It's amazing.
It's going to be the most abused plushie ever.
Oh my God. I'm planning to just have like all of the wall behind me just covered in these guys, just filled every shelf. Just take over. Every time I do a stream, I'll just add one more and it takes over the room. All right, I bought you guys time to give me your answer for a favorite faction and what.
I said it was the cultist.
All right, cultist. That's it. The cultist faction.
He's down. I think actually probably Enlightened. I really like the fact that they are so different in terms of how they interact with things, and it was always interesting and challenging to try and find designs that fit into whatever it is that we were trying to do with a particular expansion with Enlightened, and figure out how they would do their thing. Because it was, so different than all the others.
Yeah.
For me, it's Mechana. I love building the machine. That's going combo.
Yeah, combo, putting them all together. I think that one is probably my answer also, although I'm going to give a shout out. I see a bunch of people saying a shout out to the Void also as a, the sort of banished, clean, lean machine when you can build it is a really fun experience until it's not, until it's until it's just too abusive. It's there's so many fun things. So wow, okay, we've already gone through an hour. I feel like we have so much more cool stuff and cool stories to tell. So I want to talk about a couple things for everybody that's watching today, because it's Gen Con weekend. It's the 10th anniversary of Ascension. We're doing a ton of sweet stuff. Not only is this panel happening, tomorrow is the Ascension World Championships. And this is the first time that you can play in them no matter where you are in the world. You download the free app, you sign up at Gen Con. I think it's like a $12 entry fee. We have hundreds of dollars in prizes. We're going to be playing in Discord. We're going to be hanging out. We're going to be just like having a great time together. So if you ever wanted to kind of get a chance to play and participate, you could do that. Also, we're going to be having the first ever Ascension Tactics World Championships tournament. What? How is that possible? It's not even out yet. It's still live on Kickstarter. I'm glad you asked. We made the game available for free on Tabletop Simulator. So if you have Tabletop Simulator, you can go to the workshop and search for Ascension Tactics. You can download it and play it right away for free. We're doing demos live in our Discord. If somebody from my team can put a link to the Discord in the chat, that would be great. Everybody can come join our Discord and check it out. I will be doing more live streams of events and like feature matches here on this channel on Twitch TV/Stoneblade. So please follow us if you're interested in that. And then, of course, check out the Kickstarter if you're at all interested in any of the cool things we're doing. We have tons of like cool little minis, tons of cool add-ons like the Cultist plushie, the 10th anniversary edition, Year 6 collector's edition. We have like a lot of fun. And if you happen to be really excited and you love Ascension, there is a chosen tier, which for the low price of $7,500, you can become a character in the game. You could become a miniature, and you get to pick your faction. We make a character of you. We make art of you. You'll have a big version to put on your shelf at home. You will be in the game, and we'll make it. We've already got one person that's doing that. We've started working on their sculpt already. So
permanent bragging rights.
Permanent bragging rights. Everybody out there that has a copy of Ascension Tactics will have your thing. There is also an awesome replica sword, which we are doing. The Arha Templar sword is, but. We had to. We launched it on Kickstarter on Tuesday, and we pulled it off of Kickstarter yesterday because apparently Kickstarter doesn't want you to sell weapons. But
crazy rule.
Weird.
However, they don't care. They don't care if we sell it in the pledge manager afterwards. So if you happen to increase your Kickstarter by $200, we can assign it to a sword afterwards. So you don't have to get it on Kickstarter, but we will make it available because again, this is just a fun little playground moment. It's part of this celebration, and that's why I'm so happy you guys joined me for this, and we were able to kind of get together because we all live in different parts of the world. We all have our own projects and things. We used to see each other like every day for a very long period of time and work together every day, and it was like really it's just like one of the highlights of my life that we all got to create this thing and that we have been able to stay friends and continue to do all of this cool stuff. So I just want to thank you guys both like from the bottom of my heart for like what you have made of my life and what we have been able to make together. It really is like, especially times like this, I wish we were actually at Gen Con and we could hug each other. That I miss that very much, but I'm glad we're able to do this. And in closing, I want to give you guys a chance to tell people where they can find you. I know everybody knows where to find you already, Brian, but you might as well tell them for like the two people that don't know how to find you and cool stuff.
Brian Kibbler everywhere. That's it.
Easy enough. And Rob, where do they want to find your cool stuff and see the things you're working on?
WhiteWizardGames.com, or you can search for Star Realms, and that'll get you there. We got a bunch of cool stuff in the pipeline.
Awesome. So thank you again, guys. This is amazing. I will see you, if not sooner than for the 20-year anniversary. We'll be doing that one in virtual reality. So
we better be in person with drinks. That's
yeah, for sure. Well, we do.
We don't have to be in virtual reality then, though. We can.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be streaming all weekend, so we'll hopefully see you all soon.